ऑनलाइन है ना सर? ऑनलाइन है ना?
Yeah, hello, ma'am.
Good morning, sir. Sir, shall we start?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or should we wait for 2 minutes?
It's okay. Yeah, we'll wait for 2 more minutes. No problem.
Okay, sir. Participants, please don't.
Yeah, sir, मैं रखा था.
Participants, please mute your system. Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all back to the day 3 of Faculty Development Program organized by the Civil Engineering Department of IPS Academy, IES Indore. And we are glad to have with us today Mr. Rakesh Kadaverugu. He is a senior scientist at CTM Division, CSIR, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, Nagpur headquarters. He is a graduate in Environmental Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, ISM Dhanbad. He is a postgraduate in Environmental Systems Modeling and Optimization from Academy of Scientific and Innovative Research, New Delhi. He is pursuing his PhD from National Institute of Technology, Warangal, on development of multi-scale air quality modeling framework. He is associated with CSIR NERI since 2010 and has a number of publications in reputed journals, books. He has also handled research and consultancy projects at national and international levels. Presently, he is working on species habitat modeling and high resolution urban air quality modeling. We are glad to have you with us today, sir. I welcome you on behalf of IPS Academy and I request Mr. Rakesh to start the session.
Yeah, good morning, all. Thanks for the opportunity to present. Uh, Let me share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Is it clear, ma'am?
Yes, I can see it.
So, yep. Yeah. So I would like to, I think in your research experience or teaching experience, you might have already came across a lot of modeling tools and modeling methods. In this lecture, I would like to talk more about what is environmental systems modeling and what are modeling approaches that we do for environmental systems and some real life examples. And I'll orient everything in order to achieve pollution control, impact assessment, and climate change mitigation. These three are the objectives that are highlighted in this present FDP program. So let us begin with what are environmental systems. As you all aware, environment is a very complex system and which has nonlinear interactions between atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and ecosphere, or the biosphere in which we all continue our activities and we extract material energy from the biosphere, and we also pollute, and that in turn affects atmosphere, hydrosphere. So it's all a complex network of interactions that we see in the environmental systems. So basically, environmental systems exchange mass and energy between each sphere, and you see a lot of biogeochemical cycles happening. Like plants absorb CO2 and they uptake water, and the waters turn into clouds, moisture, and they falls again back in the lithosphere. So you get rivers, oceans. It's all in the continuum. For example, if you take a chunk of land mass from an watershed, it looks like there are trees, grasses, rocks, and in the below soil level, you can see the root zone where the moisture is in unsaturated form. Below that, you see groundwater level, and at the bottom, you see bedrock. So trees continuously interact with atmosphere and the lithosphere, uh,
Sir,
and keep on.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Sir, we
Yeah,
cannot see your slides changing.
yeah. I just stopped here. Is that okay?
Is it on the first slide only?
No, I'm in the second slide.
Sir, yeah, we cannot see your slides changing, sir. It's on the first slide only for us.
Just a minute.
Yeah, now it's fine, sir.
Okay. So I'll keep in this mode.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Sorry.
You can see now. Is that fine? I am on fourth
Yes,
slide
sir.
now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Now it's fine.
Yeah, fine. So I was talking more about the environmental systems and different spheres, and I was explaining about a one particular piece of earth where different processes gets interacted. So you need to define a boundary, the system boundary in which energy matter fluxes will take place, and we need to identify in order to model the system. So this is a more clear picture about surface processes. Also, we call land surface processes, where the incident solar energy from sun, part of it is reflected, refracted, and absorbed by the terrestrial features that will determine the latent heat flux from the soil surface, which is absorbed by the atmosphere. That's why we feel hot and cold, diurnal variation. So, a lot of interaction takes place, and one should understand them clearly in order to define what you need to model. This is an example of that. So, let us be more clear. So, open system environmental system is an open system, as I said, which has input, energy and material input, and energy and material output into the surroundings. So, we need to identify the parts of a system like trees, like groundwater or surface water, the biodiversity, the fishes, urban buildings, roads. So these are all parts of a system in which we deal with. And one should look at this aspect more clearly, that in environment, the parts of a system are never equal to the whole system, because parts of the system interact non-linearly, and it's not always necessary that 2 plus 2 is always equal to 4 in environmental systems. It could be 5 or 10. So because of the synergetic effects among the parts of a system. So that's why the environmental systems are non-linear in nature, and they got a lot of feedbacks among themselves, and they dissipate a lot of energy. That's called entropy, that we deal in next slide. It's second law of thermodynamics, that in all environmental systems, we, in order to perform the material cycle, some amount of energy is always lost that cannot be captured. So based on that principle, we can model the environmental systems. And the environmental systems always require energy to maintain the state of the system. As I said, they follow thermodynamical laws. You get a system where there's a highly disorderedness, it's all mixed up, the red and blue ones, in which the system is of high entropy. And you need to give energy so that you can separate the blues and red ones, which has a low entropy. This is an analogy where the environmental system has to go from order to disorder to order, so that it takes a lot of energy in order to plants to survive and synthesize the carbohydrates. So it requires energy. So it assembles all the molecules, CO2 molecules, H2O molecules in the environment, and it makes into a proper carbohydrates, for which it requires energy. So that's how the environmental systems behave. This is another instance. I'll skip this slide. For instance, if there is a bare rock here, uh, which doesn't have any vegetation or any rocks or any microbes. So when the earth formed, it was like this, and it continually evolved into this phase where you can see the lot of hills, vegetation, streams coming up, rivers. A lot of life has been developed. It has undergone several states of the system, and finally it arrived at to this stage where there is a life flourishes. So in order to achieve this, it took a lot of energy from solar energy, and it was under different evolutionary process. So how do you model this? That we do by using the principles of thermodynamics. Uh, that is, it's a very deep subject. It's called entropy analysis of environmental systems. That we will not cover in these slides. But I just want to make it clear that how open environmental systems behave and how one should look at the systems. For instance, if you see a river system, the river is flanked by the river beds, catchment area, where there are a lot of human activities, roads, agriculture, vegetation, forest, land, industries, and other maritime activities, pisciculture, lot of. And within the rivers, you see river beds and interactions of river plants with the sediments. So a lot of dynamism is there in any river ecosystem. One should, if one wants to model the pollution levels in the river, he should be very clear what should be the system boundary. Because as environmental systems are infinite and open, so the modeler should be very clear what are his system domains and what processes that he wants to consider in order to achieve the objectives. Let us say another example in urban systems. As I said, it is also open. So if one wants to model the air quality in an urban systems, so he should consider the building morphology, the materials that one used to construct the buildings, so that they absorb different amount of energy uh, and they reflect different amount of energy. So that will affect the air temperature, and the air temperature affects the air movement. So that affects the pollution transport within the urban system. Uh, and the land is land cover. If there are a lot of green areas in an urban area, you feel little less temperature than the surrounding areas because the green spaces influence the microclimate. And if one is trying to model the air pollution in a system, you should consider the dynamic vehicular movement, the wind profile, etc. So I mean to say, there are so many factors and they are all interactive and they have non-linear behavior. One should try to list them and connect them how one is influencing the other in order to achieve air quality or air temperature, meteorological variables in an urban system. So I just said these two examples. So at the outset, now I'll talk more about the modeling. So you understood what is environmental systems, how they are nonlinear in nature, and what are the system parts and how they behave. I explained with two examples of river and urban systems. Now let us focus more about what is actually modeling is. So it is a, you can see the definition. It is a physical, mathematical, or logical representation of a system and their phenomena. So why we do modeling? Because it facilitates us to understand the structure and behavior of a system, how how a tree behaves or how a river behaves, and what is its structure. So what is the depth of a river? What is the width? What is the volume of water flowing in? Volume, the quality of water. So these are all structural aspects, and there are behavioral aspects. So they all lead. They are all very dynamic, and one should understand that to model. So basically, there are 5 kinds of modeling approaches that most of you are all familiar with, and you knowingly or unknowingly you keep on using any of these things. But to make it more clear, I want to talk about it once. The basic type is conceptual models and physical models. In conceptual models, they are based on personal experiences or collective experience of a society. If a farmer sees the sky and he can guess whether it rains or not, it is based on his personal experience. It is called a conceptual model. So it is also kind of model. And someone looks at the rising sun and based on the intensity of the orange, they can estimate the moisture content and they can also predict whether it rains or not on that day. So these are conceptual models. And even in politics also, you see if someone wins from a constituency, what will happen? Or if this person gets the power, what will happen? So we all have notions. So they are all conceptual models. And in physical models, we try to represent the reality in terms of a scaled version of the actual model, actual system. A dummy. Suppose you want to model a car, so you make a dummy car, and you see how the wind around the car moves. It's a physical model. I'll talk about this in later slides. So other important category is deterministic models, which are process-based models, which the the cause and effect, the cause and uh, just a minute. Yeah, yeah, and they're highly computationally. They demand high computational power, and they solve ordinary differential equations and partial differential equations. They can be useful to say what if kind of analysis. So I'll talk about this in later slides. And other kind of models are empirical models, which are experiment based and they involve a lot of statistical tools. And you fit your measured maybe height versus weight of a person, and you fit a regression relation, and you try to make prediction or interpolation. Those are called empirical models, which are purely experiment based, and they don't have explanatory power. They cannot say why something is related to other. They just measure the correlation, and they are not reliable beyond your experimental domain. So they fail in prediction sometimes. Of course, they are very simple to model. And nowadays, the another kind of modeling is called soft computing or machine learning modeling. Uh, It's a very advanced thing, although it is not based on cause effect. It has excellent prediction capability because it is totally data driven and it is self learning. It understands the pattern in the data and it continuously evolves the signals in the output that we are measuring. So, for instance, the Amazon, Google, YouTube, they all use machine learning tools, Ola and Uber, Swiggy. So they predict the customer behavior based on a lot of data that is being generated. So in science, we use deterministic models to the maximum extent and empirical models to some extent. And of course, the soft computing has been taking grip because we are generating a lot of Earth observatory data from satellites, remote sensing data. So huge volumes of data is being generated on any given single hour. You can check with NASA's web portals. You can see any corner of Earth and you can see the vegetation, the soil moisture, the air quality, everything is being generated. So you cannot fit a process-based model to crunch lot of data. So you're all going towards the machine learning tools where big data analytics is a hot topic now in environmental systems. So as I said, physical models are a dummy of a real world. For example, a globe is a physical model of Earth, and this is a car where one can test the wind profile around the car by not actually putting a car, but a dummy of a car. And for urban cities, you can see the behavior of wind flow, the surface friction properties of an skyline of an urban center by making the dummy models. For example, an atom and solar system, they can be represented with a set of cubes connected with the rods and they all keep on rotating. So that kind of models. Yeah, more about deterministic models. As they capture the cause effect relationships. As I told, for example, Newton's laws of motion, like force is mass into acceleration. This is the physics behind the equation, and that is being modeled. And for if you see nonlinear things like convection, advection, dispersion, diffusion, and decay. So these kind of phenomenon are being fit into uh, the equations of a model, and you solve them in a coupled way in order to achieve the profiles that you uh, aim for. So the equations are derived basically from conservation of mass, energy, and momentum. Yeah. For instance, you can see in a in a glass of water, a beaker of water, you drop an ink drops. So over a period of time, how the ink diffuses. So this is a diffusion. So how do you solve it? Because you write a conservation of mass equation for this glass of water, and in each control volume, you solve the conservation of mass, you arrive at the diffusion equation. So that's how the concentration profile is been. Coming to empirical models, they are like a house made of pack of cards. They look you can easy to build, but they can fall at any time because they don't have explanatory power. So I just want to make an analogy here. We have been collecting the temperature and CO2 of atmosphere over 100,000 years. So these are all collected data. If you just fit the data, it is an empirical model. An example. These are data-driven models, as I said, support vector machines, random forests, entropy maximization models, neural networks, genetic algorithms, cellular automata. These are all been comes under data-driven models. And we got a lot of real-time sensors now installed across the cities to capture air quality, and they installed in rivers to capture river quality. And as I said, a lot of satellite data has been coming up, and even in bioinformatics, we use big data analytics. Okay, so from now I'll talk more about some of real life examples that personally I model in our lab, and I'll share my experience with uh, the tools that I use, the systems that I model, and I'll try to connect how it will be useful for environmental systems. So I'll talk more about now the plant system, the soil, plant, and atmosphere system. So in my master's time, I was I was trying to see how a plant behaves in terms of water uptake and photosynthesis, CO2 absorption, and oxygen release. So, how a plant behaves. So, in order to do that, first you need to understand the structure of a plant tree, and then you need to identify how it behaves. What happens if there is high temperature, ambient temperature, how a plant behaves. What happens if it rains? What if the structure, if the leaf diameter or leaf length of a plant is different, then how it reacts? If there is not enough soil moisture, then how, in what circumstances plant becomes stressful. So these are all structural and behavioral aspects of a system, the plant that I want to model. So uh, the first step is to define the processes that you want to model. So like in the canopy region, I identified like photosynthesis, the effect of leaf area, the effect of wind speed around, because canopy interacts wind around the canopy and the leaf areas, and the solar energy that is falling on the canopy, and ultimately you want to balance leaf energy on any leaf, the amount of radiation falling in, the amount of energy lost in conduction and convection. So the remaining temperature determines your photosynthesis capacity. So once the photosynthesis is uh, the demand for photosynthesis is captured, then it requires water from the ground. And in that process, it releases oxygen and absorbs CO2. So these are the processes occurring here. Similarly, identify process in the soil zone and how it transfers through the stem. Then I noted down all the concepts and I related in the interrelations between the feedback between all the processes have been related. Then you write all the physical equations and the variables solved in leaf temperature goes to transpiration, and that transpiration determines the root water uptake, and that is determined by soil availability. So all the variables are coupled. So you need to solve everything at a time in order to generate the profile. So for instance, I quantified the water uptake in liter per meter square per day with respect to wind speed. So if there is a lot of wind around the canopy, the water uptake keeps on increasing because the higher winds will create the favorable conditions for plants to transfer more water because it influences the boundary layer around the leaf. Similarly, uh, I just questioned what happens if trees with big leaves or small leaves, how they behave on a given environmental conditions. So these kind of what happens if the system is stressed under these conditions, how it behaves. So these kind of interpretation is being done through deterministic models because they have explanatory power, because we are using fundamental physical and chemical and biological relationships. So these kind of things are not possible in empirical models unless you perform the experiments covering all the aspects. Now I'll talk about the constructed wetlands that we did in our NIRI to treat the domestic wastewater. As one of the aspect of this today's lecture is pollution control. So I want to talk about more on this because we are trying to control the pollution, groundwater, the surface water pollution. The sewage water which is being openly dumped in our India, because 70% of the sewage is not being treated and they are just discharged into rivers. Only 30% are being treated. And we had a project where we want to utilize the wastewater and we want to treat it and then apply it for crops. So this was an Indo-European project in which we established a constructed wetlands which treats the water. So my aim was to model that system. So it has sand material, gravel material filled into the system, and we install some of the plants which provide oxygen into the sand where microbes will thrive and they will eat the wastewater. They will eat the contaminants. So the contaminated water comes here and the water gets treated at the outlet. So our objective was to model this system. So you should create a boundary. We developed the geometry of the system. We meshed it. Those who understand fluid dynamics, computational fluid dynamics, they will know it better. Otherwise, it's okay. So we have to define our system. We have to define where the water gets in, where the water flows out, and what are all the constituents inside this. Um, so these are some of the explaining equations. Uh, the first set of three equations determine the fluid flow inside the system, and the fluid flow helps in determining the fluid velocity, and the velocity transports your temperature and pollutants, and pollutant is being decayed. So ultimately, when you solve this set of equations, you get a profile of pollutants with respect to time, how the concentration varies across. So how this helps us? Because we cannot perform a lot of experiments at every corner of our system to determine what is happening inside. So but better you can represent that through mathematical models, and you take the samples intermittently and you try to validate. Then once your model is well enough, you can make predictions. uh, as an environmental manager, if someone asks, okay, you made a lab scale experiment, but what if I want to treat a 1 mld of water, or if I want to install on a larger scale, so what should be the design? So unless you model it first, you cannot scale it up, and you cannot provide the real dimensions required for treating large amount of water. And even if you design it, you can see what are the drawbacks it could have. So modeling enables us to understand the system, and even designing the system and scaling up of the system. So now I'll talk about another area where we work is called mesoscale air quality modeling. My idea is to just give a lot of exposure and different kinds of models that are being used in environmental systems. So far we covered about more lab scale kind of things, a small modeling exercises. Now we jumped into a bigger domain. Altogether, it's a different topic. So one says when one says mesoscale, it is of a scale of 100 to 200 kilometers. So we model the air behavior in eastern Vidarbha region covering Nagpur and Chandrapur. So this is our bigger domain. So how do we do that? This is a more representation of our domain. On Maharashtra map, we can see our area. So what we did was we used weather research and forecasting models, which solves the meteorological variables like temperature, wind velocity, direction, relative humidity, um, and soil surface temperatures, and vertical profiles, dispersive profiles of air. So these have been modeled on this region, and we arrived at the wind profiles, temperature profiles, and uh, we also ingested the pollutant profiles in this domain. So based on that, you can see how the pollutant concentration is varying across the domain. It is Chandrapur region where a lot of concentration is being noted, and towards Nagpur it is less, and towards western side it is further less. And this is for summer, and another one is for winter. So the idea is to um, make you aware like how big the environmental systems can go. And at these dots locations, we made physical observations and we validated with the model values. These dotted lines are the measured values, and the continuous lines are model values. So the surface temperature is almost well captured in all three locations. That's why you need to validate your models. But whereas if you see at the wind profiles, the first column is of measured values and the second columns are model values. The wind is not completely captured. The wind coming from towards north, as we measured, is not captured in the model. The model is wrongly showing the wind coming from north direction. Similarly, uh, this is in the northwest direction. There is no measured wind, but the model is showing the wind in this direction. So there are discrepancies. The temperature has been perfectly validated, but the wind speed and direction are been not validated because temperature is an average volume average phenomenon. It doesn't vary quickly. Whereas wind is a very dynamic variable which is highly dependent on local features. That's why we couldn't capture the wind. So you can see clearly the simulated versus measured values of temperature, and there is a good correlation here. And for wind speed, the model has over predicted. A lot of values are on the higher side. As I said, the discrepancies are due to the local factors which are influencing. So how do you tackle that? So we need to come from meso scale to a local scale and urban scale models. Earlier we modeled in 100-kilometer range. Now we should narrow down to 1 kilometer range where you can better validate your wind profiles because the effect of buildings, the roads, it's all been captured. So as the scale of the model varies, the processes involved also gets varied. So one should account them to capture the higher details. So we developed the 3D model of a Chandrapur city. This data is not publicly available, so we manually made it. As you can see, roads, the vegetation is in green color, roads, buildings, open spaces. So what we did was we carried the 3D domain of a city and part of a city into CFD domain, computational fluid dynamics software, where the wind profile around the buildings is being solved by applying conservation of momentum equations that we discussed. So this is a deterministic model. So with given boundary conditions of wind profile, the wind flowing through the buildings is being captured. And if you release any pollutant, and how the pollutant profile is being distributed through the buildings is being captured, and we are this study is under process and we are yet to validate it. In case if we couldn't validate it, so it says that we are missing some of the crucial environmental crucial processes that might have been missed. So we try to account it and we try to improve our model, and we'll see how best it fits to the real life. Now I'll cover in another aspect of the FDP program, impact assessment. We do a lot of environmental consultancy projects where the industry asks, the NGT or High Court asks the industries to say what is their impact on the local areas. For example, there is an oil refinery here, and there are a lot of stacks of the oil refinery, the red ones, and they keep on emitting the criteria pollutants like SOx, NOx, and CO, sometimes particulate matter. So government is interested to see what is the effect of the industry in the surrounding areas. So we do this using dispersion. We typically use AirMod tool, which is certified by US EPA. So where we give for that we should understand the structure. So how many stacks, what are their emission rates, and what is the land use in the surrounding domain, whether there are any rivers, the green cover, like that. Then the behavior of the system, like the flow of wind in the around the refinery, and the stability classes of atmosphere, which will influence the dispersion and diffusion of pollutants. So these are all behavioral aspects. We should consider all these things and feed the data into the model, and we generate the pollution profiles that I am interested in order to see the impact. So the areas which are very nearby to the refinery have high pollutant concentration, are highly impacted if a lot of people reside in this region. And as one goes away from the refinery, the contours are getting lower concentration and the people are relatively safe. So if someone wants to quantify the impact, so they need to multiply the vulnerability and the risk is the people who are susceptible to the pollutants, so that you can quantify the impacts. Okay. Till now we talked more about deterministic models and air quality models at mesoscale and urban scale. Now I'll shift gears a little bit towards ecosystem models through species distribution modeling, which is to see how the species. So you say the orange trees, the eucalyptus trees, or the neem trees. These are very common trees. What if there are medicinal plants or some plants which are very threatened or endangered, which are at the verge of extinction? So how the species are distributed across a landmass? If someone wants to conserve them, so we should model the distribution of those species, not only tree species, maybe mammals, the marine species. You can include lot many of these things. Like if someone is interested on birds, how the birds are moving, how their density is being distributed. If they are more focused in urban areas or forest areas, so what factors are affecting their distribution? So these kind of models are being grouped under species distribution modeling. So in one of our projects, we were interested to see how a medicinal plant in Himalayas is being affected by climate change. Whether there is a positive feedback or negative feedback. Yeah. This is a typical framework of species habitat modeling, where one relates a species habitat in terms of climate variables, land use variables, and other biotic factors. So these environmental factors affect uh, the distribution of the plants that you are considering. And in future, the climate is being changed. If this variable changes, or if land use changes, or if other biotic factors changes, then how the species will accommodate, or how they distribute. So that is called species distribution model. This is a schematic of the modeling that we do. So I'll go into details more. So in Uttarakhand region, in the Himalayan region, the species was Hippopis salicifolia. It is a medicinally important plant, and these are published work. And the authors collected the the locations, geographical locations where the plant is existing. So the small red dots are where the plants are being existing. In our field survey, we collected the locations. Now what we did was, in the same Uttarakhand region, we developed various environmental layers like temperature, precipitation, seasonality of temperature and precipitation, and the precipitation and annual average temperature across different seasons. So these environmental variables have been listed in the same domain, and we made a correlation between the environmental variables and the occurrence of species. If a species is here, what environmental factors it is liking? So we fit a correlative model here. So there are some 19 variables which are standardly used in species habitat modeling or ecological modeling. Like as I said, annual temperature, diurnal temperature range, isothermality, They are derived from temperature and precipitation values. There are 19 variables. They are called bioclimatic variables. So once we define what are environmental variables, we need to not necessarily include all 19 variables to fit a correlation between species occurrence and environmental variables. We need to narrow down and select only few, because there has been a lot of correlation among the variables. So they won't add any further information to model, but they only complicate your model. So from 19 variables, we jotted down 6 variables which are independently behaving. So we made groups through hierarchical cluster analysis, and we made 6 groups, and we selected one particular variable from each group, and we fitted a probability distribution function based on existing locations of the species with the environmental variables that we selected, applying the principles of uh, maximizing the entropy. Uh, I'm not going to cover this in detail, but I just want to say this is one of a machine learning tool which fits the probability distribution of anything that you want. This is the outcome of our results. So based on our observed locations, we found that the species are favoring these locations in the Uttarakhand state, where the blue color indicates the lower probability and red color indicates higher probability. So overall, this is the probability of potential distribution of these species based on existing environmental conditions. Now we try to see what will happen in future. So these are all future probabilities. So you can see there is a lot of decline in habitats in 2050 and 2070. You can see there is a considerable decline, and this is because the environmental variables that is influencing habitat are being changed in future scenarios. So that change is reflected in species habitats. For biodiversity conservationists, these kind of models are very significant to see the areas which have potential, and they go and implement the reintroduction of species in those identified areas. They cannot go and randomly reintroduce the species at 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 areas which are not suitable to the plants. So for conservation planning, this is a very important tool. Yes. And the similar kind of studies we have been implementing in other parts of our country, like in Andaman region and in entire Himalayan range, to identify how to behave according to various climate variables. So,
ये तो balloon के हैं छोटे स्टॉक और देखो लेकर जो छोटी कोरिया भी है
please, yeah, thanks. And not only in habitat modeling, the principle of maximizing entropy tool can be also applied for other environmental problems like finding out groundwater contamination mapping. If you go on a field and take water samples from the ground at in a state or in any district, so you have a point observations at single location. You take groundwater sample. Now the policy makers, they want to see how the contaminant is being distributed across a state. So from point observations, if someone wants to make a spatial profile, so this kind of entropy modeling concepts helps them to define the probability distribution functions with least commitment to the biases. So this is a very great topic which is popping up nowadays. Lot of environmental applications have been devised, and over in last 10 years there are more than 6,000 publications just based on entropy concepts, and it's very hot topic nowadays uh, yeah, for policy planning. And people have also modeled the vector-borne diseases like malaria, suppose outbreak of malaria or Zika virus. After environmental which are causing the proliferation of the malaria disease or dengue diseases, they find suppose air temperature, soil moisture, and related. For example, I'm just saying. So if you consider these three variables and take the hospital data where there have been cases of malaria or any other disease, you try to see how these environmental variables are related to the hospital observations or the spike in the vector-borne diseases. So these are point observations. We don't have continuous data. So once you fit the relation, then you apply those relation on a larger area, including all these environmental variables. Then you can have a map. There could be potential sites for these diseases. Some studies are also done using these concepts for COVID. I'm not showing right now. You can explore later. So till now we talked about different models, different scales of model, and different aspects like biodiversity, the ecosystem, and species habitat, urban air quality, and regional air quality. So now we talk more about how we should use these models for policy planning. Uh, if if a Niti Aayog or any urban commissioner, suppose he wants to plan his city in long term, what should be the green cover or what should be the way in which direction he should allow the built up area to come, or in which direction he should put the industries, uh, or if he wants to make a roadmap, future roadmap, vision document. So which includes a component of future. So so these models now should be equipped to uh, simulate what happens in future, the scenarios. So when this time factor is included, so it is called scenario based modeling. uh, I just want to say here that if you predict what happens tomorrow, or if someone predicts what happens after 1 year, the probability of being successful is high if you predict something in tomorrow. But if you predict something after 1 year, whatever you predict, it there are high chances that you end up in wrong prediction, because there are so many other factors which have been not considered that will determine your predictability. So all these outbreak of diseases, so no one have actually predicted correctly, because there are so many socio-cultural factors which affect your policy steps. So in that case, we don't end up in committing mistake in prediction. So what we do is we divide the future into set of boxes where we are sure about what happens. Like if I implement lockdown, this will happen. If I implement unlock, this will happen. Or I'm just saying an example. So in that scenario, what will happen? So you model assuming that it is 100% correct, and you try to define your outcomes. Like if China comes war with India at Ladakh, what will happen? Or if you attacks from ocean, what will happen? So you can't predict whether war will happen or not. But if war happens in this fashion, what will happen? So you need to break down future into set of scenarios. So this is a approach where decision makers are really important, really relying on these approaches. As I said, we can use scenarios for exploratory scenarios, like some crazy thing, like as I said, example like war. So if happens, what happens? So there could be 4 different pathways in which the system will behave. And in a target setting scenario, from the present situation to future, if I want to capture the CO2 constant, capture the carbon, or reduce the carbon levels from current state to maybe 30% in the future. So what are all the different pathways that one can follow to achieve that final objective? So these are three different scenarios. And if you set a target and if you couldn't reach it, so you can retrospectively analyze where it went wrong and why you couldn't fill the gap. So it helps you to correct your planning, policy planning. Likewise, scenario modeling is helpful tool. This is a recent study in Nagpur city where we identified or it quantified the role of green spaces in reducing the ambient temperature in Nagpur city. So we used empirical models. We couldn't. We were trying to use deterministic models also, but as I said, they are very complex in nature and a lot of nonlinear stuff is involved. So we first want to check whether our hypothesis is right or wrong, or to what extent is it right. Uh, so this is the on the left side, this is the current Nagpur city land use of Nagpur city. The red are built up areas, and the green ones are vegetation, blue ones are water and open spaces. Like, so we made four different scenarios. So what will happen in future? A, what will happen in B? I'll explain the drivers for the scenarios. But we just made four different scenarios for next 10 years. What will happen? So in scenarios A and D, when urban planners stress more about increasing green cover, commitment towards increasing green cover, so there has been an increase of green cover. You can see the areas which are more in green. In scenarios B and C, the commitment is been less and the commitment towards development is been more. So you can see the increase in the built up area. But actually you never know what will happen. But if this happens, the land use will be like this. So based on the existing land use, so we can predict the impact of green spaces. So how much temperature it reduces in the surrounding areas. Obviously, as there are higher green spaces, there will be more benefit. But at the same time, it offsets the increase in the built up area because they consume a lot of energy for air conditioning and cooling. You will get more energy. So this is in scenario plan for any city staying in. Yeah. So now, what is the trend now? We have been talking about statistical models or empirical models which are correlative in nature, and we have been talking about process-based models like I described about wetland, constructed treatment wetland and air quality models. Now the distinction is being reducing, and there is a continuum of modeling has been developed with hybrid models. In hybrid models, the predictive, the explanatory power of process-based models is captured. At the same time, some of crucial nonlinear uh, processes have been related with machine learning tools. So these hybrid models are becoming more popular nowadays because they strike a balance between the rigor and the agility. So they have these are some of the latest tools that some of you are familiar with, like genetic algorithms, cellular automata, agent-based modeling, multi-layer perceptron, uh, cellular automata, and multi-layer perceptron molecule analysis, Bayesian models, and other machine learning algorithms. So this is a slide where why environmental models or ecosystem models will often fail, because there are a lot of uncertainties that are not included in the model. We don't include climate variability. We don't include scale dependency factors. If, uh, if you are observing the Earth from the satellite, you don't see the minute variations like the vegetation cover. But if you zoom in clearly, then you come to see this, the minute factors, the local level factors. So at different scales, there will be different phenomenon getting involved in your model. So there's a lot of scale frequency, and often we don't have complete knowledge about the system that we are dealing with. As I said, numerous parts are involved in the system. And the environmental systems are highly determined by land use, land cover. And it is never, this has been continuously challenged. That's why we see scenario modeling in macro. And another important issue is socio-cultural dynamics. The interaction of people and their culture, maybe with the forest, or maybe with the river, or their food cooking habits. Some use chullas, some will burn it, wood, cow dung. I'm just saying an example. So is almost not included in any of the models. We isolate that and we try to model it, but it goes wrong because those factors have been not considered. So these are some of the issues that will challenge the environmental models in a bigger scale. So we conclude uh, the topics like models and different scales, the tools, and the limitations that we have. Now I'll be more specifically show some examples on various open source tools that we use. I think you're all interested in this part, and I guess most of you know these tools, but for the benefit of others, I just want to say uh, in the wet we made a 3D model of in the urban air example. We made 3D model of our city. So how do you make 3D models? So to begin with, you should be familiar with the open source tools which we use. You can note down the OpenSCAD, which is used for making 3D models. And another important tool is called FreeCAD, where you can make machine designs as well. You can also design the environmental systems that you're interested, like air purifiers, or you can design houses. Within the houses, you can put air conditioners, the fans, the air filtration systems. You can model using 3D tools. There are some more examples from Salome model, which is a hybrid of 3D model, as well as it also solves some basic fluid dynamic equations and stress strain related equations. This is a NetGen, which once you develop a 3D model, uh, sorry. So in each mesh, you solve the continuity equations like mass, momentum, and energy. So you need to mesh the 3D geometries that you have been developing. This is a very good tool, NetGen. And another tool you might be knowing, SU2, which is an open source CFD software. And another beautiful tool is called OpenFOAM. I'm sure most of you know about it, in which it gives you the power to write your own equations for defining any number of complex processes. It doesn't limit you to solve only set of equations, only limited set of phenomena. Uh, you can write any number of equations. You can define any number of physical relationships. Suppose if I want to model urban system, the interaction between trees and water, and the pollution removal from trees, the radiation reflectance, these are all can be modeled in open form. So you can write, basically you should write your own equation. So it allows you to do that. So and this is our program. I think you might be knowing about it. It has been evolved recently, and it is widely used for machine learning and statistical analysis for empirical research. If you have any experimental data, you can fit your like you can see visualize your data. You can fit your relationships between the data. You can fit your you can optimize your experiments, response surface methodologies. You can make perform inferential statistical tests. You can make descriptive statistics, statistical summaries. So this tool is widely used for my research, and all the models that I have used, the R is a major component in it. You might be knowing MATLAB very well, but GNU Octave is a open source version of MATLAB. It's not MATLAB, but which is similar to MATLAB, which is open source. The syntax is exactly same, and anyone can use for scientific computing. So the differential equations that I talked about, you can discretize and solve for any in a matrix format for your systems using GNU Octave. For data crunching, you can use. It has also got computer vision algorithms which can be used for real-time data processing of maybe robotic networks. You can all use that. The same like GNU Octave. This is a Scilab, which is similar to Octave and MATLAB. Same, almost same syntax. So another tool that I want to say is Geographical Information Systems tool called QGIS, which is open source. When you talk about spatial modeling, like in our example, I said about species distribution modeling or urban air quality or mesoscale, it involves a spatial component, which is not a single point based phenomena, rather it is a spatial phenomena. So for spatial modeling, you require GIS tools to visualize your data and to better interrelate multiple spatial variables with your output. So this is a very good tool where I've been using extensively. So we are almost coming to end of my talk. So why we should use open source tools? Because it allows you to be independent. You don't have to be dependent on your organization for licenses, for procurement of software, for huge amount for maintenance of the tools. So I urge all of you to shift your working culture with open source software, and you adapt Linux environment, Linux operating system than Windows. I suggest that because Linux has got great design for scientific computing, parallel computing, and with shell scripting you can make connections between multiple software. Uh, so you can write dynamic programs. So I personally use a lot of these tools, which smooths my way of working. And so I just want to say you that as you are, most of you are faculty in engineering colleges, so I urge you to adapt these tools to solve textbook problems with all these tools that I've been talking about, and verify the results with analytical approach and computational approach, which gives enthusiasm for students to learn more about the physics, the chemistry involved in that, and helps them to visualize the theory. So you can enjoy your theory with modeling, and that enriches your understanding. So, so I just urge you all to use this culture of research. Uh, I'm very quick. So the takeaway message through this presentation is that models help in bridging gap between the theory and practice, and helps to translate your thoughts into theories. So you imagine something and you want to see how it behaves. You write equations, you solve equations, then you visualize it. So from theory to practice, you just transcend from theory to practice, and it also goes in reverse. Based on your experiments, you imagine a theory and you write an equation and you develop your theory. So models lies in between theory and practice, and helps you to visualize more science. And one should also decide what are their system boundaries and how best they can represent the physics of their system, whether empirical models suits better or deterministic model suits better, or if they have a lot of data, whether they should go for machine learning tools, depending on their objective. And yeah, and the selection of variables is very important thing. As I said in our earlier example, out of 19 different variables, we narrowed down to 6 variables. The more number of variables, the more complex the model becomes, and it is unnecessarily burdens your computational capacity. So it's the simple models are very elegant models with minimum number of sensitive variables. So you should try to find out that based on your domain knowledge in your respective fields. And the most important message is like one should understand the limitations of the models that you are using. As I said, there are a lot of socio-cultural limitations that are not accounted in our models. So they will completely turn around the expected outcome. Uh, Not only that, so one should clearly define their boundaries and they should know what are their limitations. And and the most important thing is like it is well said, like garbage in is garbage out. Model doesn't know what a modeler is doing. If you feed garbage in it, it throws garbage out. And even though you make beautiful graphs, so it can be a garbage. So you should be very cautious, like your model is making sense with input data or not. Yeah. And ultimate message is like all models are wrong to some extent, but they are useful. Because as model systems are highly complex, so you cannot imagine what will happen. So models help you to imagine little bit, although they are not accurate enough, but they will help you to comprehend and quantify to some extent. Um, these are some of the books that I recommend everyone to go through, which changed my perspective about environmental systems. I believe that it will also help you. The book called Web of Life, it talks more about the geometry of universe. You might be wondering, the universe is very diverse, but it has a fundamental geometry also. It is called fractal geometry. Uh, Back in 1950s, Mandelbrot has defined the fractal computing also. For example, mm, if you look the Earth surface, you find a lot of small rocks, boulders, sand grains. When you look at from satellites, it exactly looks the same as you look the Earth with our naked eyes. Because the geometry has been same. So the solar system is also in atomic structure. So this is called the fractal geometry. So then the nature replicates itself at different levels. So one should have this approach when they are looking at nature, and it enables them to understand the geometry of nature and the feedbacks, the connection of things in goes around in nature. And another important book I want to talk about is The Black Swan. It's called it's known as a mental rock star, because the theories that are included in Black Swan book are mind blowing, and they talk about the extreme events that happens, uh, and how extreme events influences our daily life. If you are measuring something continuously, maybe you are measuring atmospheric carbon dioxide over a period of time, but there could be some events, maybe some volcanic eruption altogether, and the whole trends or turns upside down. You don't know what will happen. So he talks more about those kind of extreme events, and the message is like you should be open to the randomness of the nature, and you should be able to pursue without any biases. It's a very good book. Uh, and just today morning, I was going through a famous book from Hemin Sunim, and I found this quote very interesting. It says, "The whole universe is contained in an apple wedge in your lunchbox, like apple tree, the sunlight, the cloud, rain, earth, air, farmer's sweat, all all are in it, and the delivery track, gas, market, money, cashier smile are all in it. Refrigerator, knife, cutting board, mother's love, all are in it. So everything in whole universe depends on other things. So the nature is all connected. So other wants to say that the apple veg that you eat or the air you breathe, it's all connected with other environmental entities. So now think what exists in you. So the whole universe is in us. So we are part of this universe, and whatever the system you consider is a part of everything. So the nature is all connected. If you want to model it, one should have that understanding, and one should be very careful in modeling environmental systems. Uh, with this, I thank you all for your time, and now we are open to discussion. And before that, I just want to show you a animation of urban air quality that organizers have requested. So I was talking about air quality in urban cities. So this is how it looks in real time. Uh, the red ones are highly polluted, and the blue ones are less polluted. Pollution behaves in the urban systems. This we do using CF open form model, computation fluid dynamics model. We developed geometry using the tools that I said, and we solved all the continuity of mass, momentum, energy equations, and we derived this. And we are planning to do this for a whole city in a larger scale and validate the results with our experimental instruments. Yeah, this is our approach. So I thank you all, and we are open for discussion now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are the participants willing to ask any questions or doubts? Sir, I have a doubt if you can clear that. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are audible now. Please.
So there was a section in the presentation where you had shown a contour mapping regarding the impact assessment.
Yes,
Sir,
yeah.
can you please help me with that? How can we do that? How can we do that contour mapping?
Yeah, it depends. It is a visualization technique in which the values of the pollutants have been grouped, and it is a different color code has been assigned to get the contours. So it is a visualization technique. Before that, one should model the physics how the pollutants has been dispersing. Once you are with those values, you can develop the contour map. So we used a software called AirMod, which has a set of tools to do the contour mapping. Yeah, that can be done.
So in that, what type of data do we require? We require all components of water, air, soil, and other things.
Yeah, as I said, if you are modeling air system, urban air system, and the example that I showed was industrial pollution setup, where we consider only the land use, the air above the land, and surrounding the industrial area. So that is our system boundary. So
So
we
that
developed
contour mapping was having air quality data.
yeah, that was the air quality data, sulfur dioxide data. Yeah.
So there's a question from Soumya Kiran. Can you share what type of plants can be grown in wastewater-oriented wetlands?
Yeah, it's a very well developed research. We used Typha latifolia, and there have been research even in Niri and other parts of the country where they used Canna indica, and there are a lot of pragmatis being used, and a lot of water loving plants are there. Some are halophytes. Uh, I think I can get a list from the literature and I can share to your audience. I can share with you so you can be circulated.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. This is Mamata Tendulkar from Mumbai. Sir, I like your PPT a lot. You have given some tools, free tools available.
Yes.
Will you share that PPT or tools with us? Because while listening, we couldn't note it down. So,
Yeah. So yeah, sorry for that, ma'am. I'll share all the tools available that we use with organizers, and they'll circulate you.
thank you so much, sir. And it was really very nice. And this is really good knowledge. I mean, at least I was not aware about these tools.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody amongst the participants who would like to share their views or would like to ask?
So I can see another question like the plants that we used, whether it could be consumed by human beings. Strictly no, and these plants will be used for bioenergy generation. That will be a best option, or maybe making composting. Uh,
One more question.
yeah, I
Can it
can
be
see.
used for cattle feed?
Yeah, there are some studies about that, but it depends on the heavy metals or the pollutant levels in the plants which uptake from wastewater. And if they follow the safety limits, that can be used, but it should be under very scientific based that I cannot comment. I don't know, like may or may not be. It depends on the pollutant levels accumulated in the plants.
Hello.
Simpson
Hello.
distribution.
It's just,
Yeah.
Yeah,
hello.
yeah. Hello?
It's just a query sort of thing. Actually, I
Yeah,
just
please
wanted
go
to know,
ahead.
like, in what capacity, like, what is the capacity of the wastewater treatment? Like, if you talk about the groundwater and at the ground level, not groundwater, there is a lot of, increasing. The wastewater is increasing on a day-to-day basis. So, like,
Right.
what is the practicality or the applicability in the ground level? Like, if you if you do this in a controlled environment or a controlled setup, you'll have a different result. Or maybe if you do that thing in open, how
Mhm.
how there'll be a difference in the treatment thing. I just wanted to
Yes.
know about it.
Yes, sir. There have been studies based on lab experiments and field experiments, which are in situ experiments, and the treatment capacity of the plants are extremely dependent on the scale that we use, because the contact time of pollutants with the plants in the real life could be different, and the temperature it gets exposed could be different. Uh, Personally, I cannot comment on that, but there are studies which highlighted the difference in the treatability in the lab scale and as well as in the field scale. Uh, there could be significant effect.
Okay, like I happened to visit one such area in Delhi. Like it's not actually a wastewater treatment. They have regenerated a water body, by treating the wastewater, and it's not that big in capacity, but the result has been very positive and very successful. So just I wanted to know about, like, if you talk about the larger scale or the bigger scale, how applicable it is. That is why I asked you this question.
Yes, sir. There will be a lot of change that we can comment to some extent by modeling all the bigger system, and or putting your equipment on a larger scale and make measurements over there. And I'm sure there will be a lot of difference. It won't be that simple.
Okay.
Um,
Uh, there are other questions coming up of Simpson distribution index.
Sir,
Uh, yeah.
are you?
So I think it is more of biodiversity index, which I'm not aware of. I can tell you about Shannon index, but I don't know about Simpson index. And
Hello.
if
Yes.
Sir, thank you. Sir, can I ask you something?
yes, ma'am, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. First of all, thank you so much for such a wonderful lecture, sir. And you have covered many points which we were not aware of. First of all, sir, my question to you is, you talked about some habitats, species habitats के बारे में आपने बताया जिनमें कि जब हम when we talk about what will happen to them in future, if we analyze at present, we can predict their future also. So can you tell me what kind of species you studied and how many species you covered? Means
Yeah. Ma'am, this is we covered one species at a time in our studies, and
okay,
the species name is called Hippobis salicifolia, which is also called sea buckthorn, which is native to Himalayan region. And this is an example that I quoted, and we studied other species in other parts of India also. So these studies enables us to model one species at a time, as well as the interaction of multiple species at a time, so which includes biotic feedback among other species. So this is a higher level of applying the same tool that we can certainly apply, and we can also derive the changes in biodiversity indices if you include 10 or more number of species. So with respect to climate variability, how the biodiversity of a region is completely varying. So some may go up, some may go down, some may be some species which are interacting on other species. If that goes down, the species that we consider may also goes down, because that is a feedback relation. So these kind of studies are underway and it can be done.
okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sir, what is your area of interest, sir? I just wanted to know that, like, you're working on which specific things.
Sorry, what is that?
Your area of interest, like a research interest, it revolves around, sir, what things like?
You're asking about my area of interest. So my area is to model urban systems and species habitat modeling, uh, I'm into so many other modeling areas like treatment systems modeling, and I also cover a lot of statistical modeling and machine learning modeling for data analysis. So I just cover a lot many areas. So I'm a curious and I'm enthusiastic to learn more. So I just keep on exploring.
A lot to learn from you then, sir, in future as well.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah. So actually,
Okay, this is a one question.
so we can cover one single topic in an entire day if you go into details. But my idea was to show maximum exposure that I have been involved with. Maybe I'm sorry if you couldn't go into details in any of the areas that you're interested. Maybe we can do a very detailed session next time where we can talk one particular area that you are all interested.
Yes, sir, you gave a holistic idea about, different aspects and how things can be done differently in different areas. That was
Yes.
really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So anybody else? I suppose there is no more question.
Yeah, that's
So
fine.
I would like to thank you, sir, for giving such a wonderful knowledge about the modeling, different types of open sources that are available, which we can use. And it was indeed a pleasure and an honor for us to have you with us today. And thank you for devoting your precious time to us.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed, and I personally thank organizers, and I also thank my colleague Dr. Yogesh Pakade for connecting with you, and I thank all of your organizing team. Thank you. It's been a nice time for
Thank you,
me.
sir.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a wonderful experience, sir. Thank you so much. I thank all the participants and I request all the participants to get back to me tomorrow morning again at 11:45 a.m. for the session for the day 4. And thank you all.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.